Mike, we're continuing our What I Love About Comics video series. What's another thing you love about comics?
Okay, well, no surprise to anyone that knows me. One of the things that really attracts me to comic books has always been the writers. A good writer will make a comic book great. A good artist is important, but artists don't tend to run huge chunks of series. There are exceptions. George Perez, Mark Bagley, Jack Kirby, but most artists, they're on for 5, 10 issues, then they leave for something else because it's so time intensive. Writers stick around, and so they, in my mind, define the flow of the book more. One of the guys that I've always loved, you don't hear me talk about him a lot, but I've always loved his work. It's a guy named Steve Englehart. I first started reading Steve Englehart's stuff in the 70s. One of the first things he did was a very little known short series in Amazing Adventures featuring this gray hairy guy who used to be a member of the X-Men, the Beast, Hank McCoy. First of X-Men to ever have his own solo series. And yes, he was gray there, and then later on they changed him to blue when they brought him into the Avengers, but that's a different story. But Englehart was the guy that said, hey, let's take this character that's not being used and turn him into a solo star, change him totally, and did some fun stories. Oh, by the way, that's also the series that brought Patsy Walker from the romance books into the Marvel Universe. So, Hellcat fans, there's something cool you probably didn't know. But that's where he got his start. From there, he swiftly went all over the place. Co-writing some of the original Thanos War and Captain Marvel with Jim Starlin. Well, actually, more scripting. But then taking over Captain Marvel when Starlin left for several issues. And he really got the taste for cosmic. He did a very classic run on the Avengers, which included things like the Avengers Defenders War, the Kang Celestial Madonna saga, the first Serpent Crown affair. Great stories with the Avengers at their peak, fighting cosmic menaces, fighting things that no hero could handle on their own. And along the way, introduced characters like Mantis, just shown in Guardians of the Galaxy. Made Kang from a one-note bad guy into a serious threat. Rewrote the origin of the Vision and brought in all sorts of history. At the same time he was doing that, here's this Englehart guy writing Defenders, which is why he could do so well with the Avengers Defenders War, which, by the way, was the first event comic that I can think of, where you had more than one series coming together to tell a big epic story. So those of you that hate Marvel's event comics, you can blame Steve. Not our Steve, of course, Steve Englehart, or Sturdy Steve, as he was called in the bullpen days. So, he did just a few things there, and then got tired with Marvel and left, and started working with this guy, Marshall Rogers, very good artist. Did a couple of things with him for DC, just little books. A run of Detective Comics that's considered classic, which included the introduction of Silver St. Cloud, a love interest for Bruce Wayne, who actually stuck around. Some classic Joker stories, including The Laughing Fish, where Joker poisons the water. Really good stuff. It's considered one of the high points in Detective's run. Second behind only Archie Goodwin's run as editor. But that's a totally different story also. From there, he turned around, did a couple of a couple of more little things. Um, let's see, the revival of Mr. Miracle, first Mr. Miracle that was not by Jack Kirby, also drawn by Marshall Rogers. A run of Green Lantern, this is later on, that started before Crisis on Infinite Earths, through the Crisis issues, which bring back Guy Gardner, make him into a Green Lantern. Hal loses the ring, straight on through to the destruction of the Corps, or of Oa, the Guardians leaving, and the Corps showing up on Earth where John Stewart was there on a regular basis, Guy Gardner was, Hal was, and introducing new characters like Kilowog, Chip, and Salak. You know, Kilowog, yeah, pretty much a fan favorite. Yeah, that's Englehart. But those aren't even the best Green Lanterns that he created. He created a vegetable Green Lantern, a plant, and of course my favorite, a dead Green Lantern. Yes, a dead Green Lantern. He wasn't a zombie. He was killed by Sinestro, but his willpower was so great that he would not let himself die until he managed to stop Sinestro. So here you've got this Green Lantern who's decaying, can get blown into pieces, and would put himself back together as long as his ring was recharged. That's a pretty cool concept. Now, Englehart did all of those things. In the meantime, there's a few other little things that he did. The most popular Silver Surfer series is the one that was in the 80s that, of course, the Infinity stuff spun out of. That was when Jim Starlin took over writing. Who did he take over from? Oh, that would be Steve Englehart, who wrote the first 30 issues of Silver Surfer, starting off with Marshall Rogers, then with this little-known guy, Ron Lim, who later became big, working on the Infinity stuff. Again, it's Englehart. And that's just a touch of what he's done. If you like the Ultraverse, which was a great series of comics that I'll talk about at some point, I'm sure, he created the Strangers, a group of characters who all got their powers at the same time, and so they're thrown together to be heroes, but they don't necessarily like each other, they don't get along. Oh, and by the way, one of them is a bad guy who's trying to betray the group. And Nightman, which took Steve's love of jazz and New Orleans culture and turned it into a superhero. Now that may sound vaguely familiar to you from Valiant's Shadow Man if you've read the original stuff. Well, there's a reason for that. Shadow Man was created by Englehart also. Oh, along the way, he also created a few other characters you may have heard of. A little guy named Star-Lord, that's it. Yeah, I think I've heard of him in a movie lately. Yeah, that was an Englehart. And for that matter, so was Master of Kung Fu, Shang-Chi. Yeah, created by Englehart, working with Starlin. I seem to keep mentioning that Starlin name too. Why? Because Englehart and Starlin were friends, and they worked together on a lot of stuff. So if you like Marvel Cosmic, chances are you like Englehart. If you like great Batman stories, chances are you'd like Englehart. If you love great Green Lantern, chances are you'd like Englehart. If you don't like Englehart, chances are it's because you haven't read Steve Englehart. And gee, I didn't even mention the stuff that he did on Doctor Strange in the 70s. Another great series. When you want to talk about cosmic, the Ancient One dies, the Cthulhu mythos coming into the Marvel Universe. The destruction of the entire universe, only to have it recreated. Oh, and Ben Franklin shows up too. Why? because it made sense. Steve Englehart is one of the reasons that I love comics.